Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Good evening, friends. Welcome back to Kardec Radio. If this is your first time, welcome, and a big welcome to all of you who may be listening to this later on demand. My name is Teresa Castro, and I am the host for the 6 p.m. Prayer for Peace. So welcome, everybody. And as usual, we have a short message, and then we go into our prayer. And today, in light of September is recognized as Suicide Awareness Month. So we are going to read the story of a suicide out of this book. So this is one of the codification books, Heaven and Hell by Alan Kardec. The second part of the book, part 2, is filled with chapters of different categories of suicide, different categories of discarnated spirits. So, for example, there's a whole, multiple cases he presents of communications with discarnated spirits. Perhaps they were criminals, repentant spirits, suffering spirits, good spirits, and then there is the category of suicidal spirits. So I have chosen one that we can focus on for this session today. And this is entitled An Atheist. So we're told that this is Mr. JBD, who was an educated man, but saturated to the core with materialistic ideas. He believed neither in God nor the existence of the soul. At the request of a relative, he was evoked at the Spiritist Society 2 years after his death. So we know that in Spiritism, we do not practice evocations. However, at the time of Kardec, he was building a base foundation. So he was working with mediums at that time, various mediums, and collecting information. So this spirit, discarnated spirit, is an atheist. And yes, he died by suicide and he drowned himself. And so when he's evoked and he, appears at the meeting through the medium, they ask questions, the group. And one of the questions was your death intentional? And he says, yes. So they go on to ask him, what motive did you have for killing yourself? And he says, weariness of a life without hope. This is the spirit's response. And what Kardec teaches us in the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 5, item 15, is he tells us no matter the motive or the technique one uses to die by suicide, he says the cause is always the same, and it's discontentment. So we can hear this in the answer of the spirit when he says, weariness of a life without hope. So Kardec gives us a little feedback, educational piece, in addition to this conversation that he's having, that the group is having with the spirit. Kardec says, one thinks about suicide when life is hopeless. One also wants to escape unhappiness at any price. One realizes that through suicide, one does not escape an evil. He's talking about, as we learn and educate ourselves with Spiritism, spiritual science. He says, through suicide, one does not escape an evil, but falls into another one 100 times worse. And he reminds us that suicides can be intentional or unintentional, where we know in No Solar, Andre Louise, he finds himself in the lower zones and he's referred to as a suicide, and he doesn't understand because he remembers that he died on an operating table. But then he comes to understand and learn what that means, how he was not making good life choices and wasting his life energies, which was in a form indirect suicide. They ask him, how is he, if he can describe his current situation. So this is Kardec's group asking the suicide. And he says, my soul is like a furnace. It is being tormented horribly. So they were given the information that he was a materialistic man. He was highly educated, but he was very materialistic. He did not believe in God. He did not believe in anything after the current life. And so, Kardec asked the questions, where do you get the materialistic ideas you had when alive? Why were you so materialistic? And he said, the spirit tells him, well, in a previous existence, I was evil, and my spirit was condemned to suffer the torments of uncertainty throughout life. That is why I killed myself. So that we can see this is not his first time dying by suicide. So Kardec, being the educator that he is and very wise man, he's wondering, how can this be? Because we know when we discarnate that we pass through the spirit world. And so therefore, as we incarnate, we all have this intuition or this deep knowing inside all of us of God. But he's wondering, so why does this person not? Does this spirit? And so he says, this intuition, so this deep sense of knowing about God, is denied to some spirits as they're, coming in with a new incarnatory plan. He says, and it's denied to these spirits who have preserved their pride and have not repented of their wrongs. Their trial consists in acquiring, during corporeal life, and through their own reasoning, proof of the existence of God and the future life that they have incessantly in front of them. However, their self-conceit at not believing in anything above themselves prevails, and they must endure grief until their pride is overcome and they finally surrender to the evidence. So I think this is good information for all of us to be aware of, that those who may label themselves as atheists, that we should come to understand that perhaps, and there is the possibility that they are one of these incoming incarnates that do not have that intuition about God. And it is actually a trial for them to, through their own reasoning, to come to that conclusion of God. And also to be aware, like the spirits have told us in the Spirits book, when Kardec asked, what is our greatest obstacle to moral progress? They said pride and selfishness. And the same thing applies here, that their trial is to work out through their reason that there is a God. Yet pride and selfishness get in the way of this reasoning. And so they very often have, it's a difficult trial. So let us appreciate that. Let us remember that, the best way that we can be helpful is then to actually in prayer for these suffering spirits, that they are facing a hard trial. And so we see that the law of cause and effect is happening, that there is a consequence to atheism. Of course, we cannot, make a black and white statement or, build some dogma around this, that this is always the case. We know there is divine justice and all intentions are considered. So, but let us be aware of the hard trial our brother and sister may be facing. And so they asked the spirit, they said, do you have any message for your relatives? And what does he say? He asked that they pray for him. And this is something that we see over and over and over in this part 2 of Heaven and Hell by many of the spirits, not just the spirits who had died by suicide, but the repentant spirits, the suffering spirits, the hardened spirits, even the good spirits, that all request prayers and how effective it is in consoling their suffering. So I think, we've just touched on this story very briefly, but very briefly, very lightly. There's much more to this story, much more. But I'm going to stop there and hope that it has enticed your curiosity, that maybe you'd like to read the rest of it, maybe look at some of the other stories. And so today, for our closing prayer, I would like to use a prayer by the Spirit Emmanuel, psychographed by Chico Xavier. And this prayer is entitled Almost Suicidal. And it comes from the book Caminos de Volta, which means roads to return. And I'm sure it's not translated into English. However, there's a small pamphlet that was put out by the Ben Franklin Spiritist Society in Massachusetts, and that is what I'm reading it from. So again, it's entitled Almost Suicidal. So let us connect with our breathing. Let us connect with our inner vision, our inner hearing. Let us connect with our heart. And we connect with you, our divine creator, Blessed Mother. And we remember, in this month in particular, those who have died by suicide, those who may be contemplating. And we ask for their consolation, their comfort, and that they may be receptive to the love that is already surrounding them. We pray that our own hearts may be filled with forgiveness, understanding, and the desire to be of help. Prayer by Emmanuel, Almost Suicidal. We feel you a step from the cliff, almost falling. However, we are here seeking your heart for rebalance. Nobody can measure your pain, but it is necessary to recognize that even though we suffer, there is always someone at the crossing of bigger obstacles. Drop the idea that includes you to destruction and reflect. Not all the roads are totally closed against life. Even if you are seeking the end, death is an illusion. At work and at rest, in the light and in the shadow, in the day and at night, we find ourselves in what we did. Remember the wisdom of life, which regenerates a damaged herb, has also the cure for any of our pains. Rise up from the complicated valley of your own emotions and leave behind the fog of denial and doubt. Go forward, saving opportunities that await your thoughts and your hands. So be it, so it is. We thank Emmanuel for this beautiful prayer, and we thank Alan Kardec and all the spirits who have brought this information that we may better educate ourselves in navigating life. So let us go forward and be of service in helping someone else, however small, and the greater good. Remember, picking up trash is doing the good. Many blessings, and I'll see you all next week.